Welcome to New Hope. To those of you that are streaming, we want to welcome you as well. And we're going to be team teaching today. So let me just start it off out of the book of Ezra. And it's going to come up on the screen. So please read along with me, would you? It says this, go. With praise and thanksgiving, they sang to the Lord. He is good. His love towards Israel endures forever. And all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord because the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid. But many of the older priests and Levites and family heads who had seen the former temple wept aloud when they saw the foundation of this temple being laid, while many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sounds of weeping because the people made so much noise and the sound was heard far away. Being all mixed up, that's what we're speaking about. If you think about it, some of the people were shouting, God has helped us. And the others were shouting, oh, God, help us. Maybe we find the answer to this dilemma. It's in verse 8. After everything was set and the foundations were put in place, it says this, listen, they appointed Levites 20 years old and older to supervise the building of the house of the Lord. 20 years old and older to supervise this. The older ones are probably thinking about this grand temple and then realize that a bunch of adolescents are now in charge. They thought, this is going to look really bad. You know, funny, the older I get, the younger others look. For example, I see people 20 years or 21 years old getting married, and I'm thinking, they're babies, they're kids. And my wife has to remind me, honey, you were 21 when you got married. Yeah, but I was much more mature than them, far more mature. But actually, they were weeping because they saw the burnt remnants of what once stood so magnificently. They could never replace that splendid temple because it was more than a temple. It was more than a building. It held so many years, decades of memories. The Bible says that these elders were the ones who had seen the first temple. Its grandeur, its splendor, it was the good old days. It would never be as good as the good old days. That's what they felt. And so they wept because they realized what was lost, something that could never be replaced, even by a new building. The old one, though, they felt was more than a building. That's why we can't just replace it with a building. It contained life. I mean, our pain, our joys, memories, experiences, and thousands of hours on our face in prayer, devotion, worship, singing, meeting, lives being changed. You see, so much had happened within those walls. It contained their lives, and now it was rubble. Now, the others were rejoicing because of what they were gaining, something brand new, full of potential and hope. But the others were weeping because of what they had lost. It reminds me of a story of a bride, a young lady getting married in the Midwest in the 1800s. And she's leaving her beloved family at the train stop. And a picture is of their family crying, all weeping because they would see her no more as she would go west to marry her fiancé, and they would live out in the West. So they were in the Midwest and they would never see her again. So they're at the train stop crying. But in the same picture, a day's journey along down the track is another family that were thrilled. They had hired a band with fanfare and graffiti to welcome their new daughter-in-law into their family. The groom-to-be was standing there searching the horizon, sweaty palms, watching for any vestige of that train cresting the horizon that would bring him his bride and the mother of his children. Great joy. You see, on one hand, there was weeping, and the other hand, there was joy. All in the same picture. You look at this, they're crying over the temple, some with joy, some with sorrow. Yet with all of the mixed feelings, with a sundry of emotions and mixed opinions, doesn't mean that what's happening is necessarily wrong. In fact, I think the lesson today is this: things couldn't have been more right. Just like a newborn baby coming into the world, you got to realize some of God's best gifts come with a mixture of pain and delight, a mix of suffering and joy. Looking at this awkward scene, here's the lesson. We can learn lessons from both sides. Yeah. First of all, let's take a look at the elders. The elders were remembering what God had done in the past, and it caused them to weep. But look through the tears to what they were remembering. Before we just say, oh, they're a bunch of old fogies and they're just people that are remembering the old days. They're just too nostalgic, too emotional. But stop for a second. You got to think of it this way. They were remembering all of the mighty things that God had done. They remembered the miracles, the answers to prayer, the lives that were changed, hope that was restored, hearts that were renewed, marriages that were healed, all contained within that place. And they had to remember, they remembered all of that. Can I say this? When things in your life get mixed up, because it will be in your marriage and your finances and the way you think, when things get all mixed up and when the sky seems to be falling and everything seems to be in a whirlwind, do this. Take time to remember or be reminded again of the miracles God did in the past. You remember David? David, that shepherd boy, when he was faced with a giant who was mocking him and the people of Israel and his God, then add to that, even his own skeptical family doubted and questioned David's ability when David said, I'll go up against this giant. But when he was disbelieved and when he was slandered, mocked by that giant, instead of giving up and just saying, okay, I guess I'm pretty bad, I guess I can't. No. You know what David did? Remember, he recalled his time when he was a shepherd in the past, when a lion and a bear attacked. And God gave him an uncanny ability to single-handedly defeat both of those predators. And then he says in 1 Samuel 17:37, and you can read it with me. Would you read it? Go. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. Can I encourage you to do something? This week, take some time to memorialize what God has accomplished in your life. Just write them down. For example, in my Bible, I have written down, and you can't see them all here, but you can see, a part of them here. My pages are falling out, but all of these are just different miracles and things that God has accomplished in my life. And then in the back, I write different things here with the dates on them of what God had done, of provision, how God accomplished in my life in years past when He provided when I didn't have anything. I actually write down what came in when I didn't think I was going to make it. And by somehow, somewhere, God provided. And I love reading these through once in a while, and I'm made again freshly aware of the God who helped me in the past will be the same God who will do it again. On the walls in our home, we have framed scriptures containing our life verses and reminders of God's faithfulness. We put them everywhere. Can I encourage you to do the same? Put God's faithfulness on display, because there's going to be times you're going to get all mixed up. And you won't know if you're coming or going. You don't know what tomorrow holds. You're afraid. Surround yourself with the record of His faithfulness. Remember, I was telling you about the walk of faith that's going to be on the floor of the new structure, tiles of people's names. That's what the walk of faith is to do. It's to remind us in years to come of the God who was faithful to those people will be the same God who will be faithful again. The one who was so wonderful in the past will be the same that'll be so wonderful in the future. The one who could be trusted in the past, we can trust Him yet to come. Again and again. So when things get mixed up, surround yourself with a record of God's faithfulness so that you'll be reminded how good God has always been, and He doesn't change. And even though the future sometimes might seem obscure or even dark, remember, let these things remind you that the same God who led us through the valleys yesterday will lead us yet again. He who provided for you in the past will provide for you in the future. He never changes. He is still the same yesterday, today, and forever. A building might change, generations might change, leaders might change, but we serve the same God, the God of our fathers, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. But we can also learn something from the younger ones as well. I want you to read again what Nehemiah says. He says this: many others shouted for joy. No one could distinguish the sound of the shouts of joy from the sounds of weeping, because the people made so much noise. There's a lot of noise going on. Many shouted for joy because they saw that the new foundation had been laid. And it was for them. It was a sign of a new beginning. You don't want to take away from the memories, but you can't camp there either. You see, we can learn from the past, but we can also learn for the future. You see, you get knowledge or experience and memories from your past. You get inspiration from your future, because that holds potential. See, the joy they felt was because the foundation meant purpose, direction, single-mindedness. We're going somewhere, and a commitment to that. And although the elders could still see something that was once there before, the younger ones could see something that was never there before. They could see something even greater. You see, that stuff is invaluable. Vision. And we need both, don't we? We need record of the faithfulness of God, but we need the inspiration to be able to see vision for what is yet to come. We thrive on both, and that's what gives us the balance. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And that's our lesson. Solomon reminds us of that in Ecclesiastes 7:18, and it says this. Read it on the board if you would. It is good that you grasp one thing and also not let go of the other, for the one who fears God comes forth with both of them. In other words, if you're smart, you'll take both of them. It won't be either or. You see, in other words, some things are best as a both and. And if you're wise, you can get the best of them both. If you miss it, you'll be all mixed up. I remember it's a humor story of a man catching all kinds of fish, and someone was watching him, scrutinizing him, thinking, nobody can catch that much fish. And So he, just before he goes out again, he runs up to this boater, this fisherman, and critical of his ability, doubtful that he caught all the fish. Did you catch all these fish? And the guy is real humble, the fisherman. Well, sort of, kind of old geezer, sort of. He says, what do you mean, sort of? It's either or. Either you caught them or you didn't. Now, did you catch all this fish? He said, well, sort of. The person said, it's either or. He said, well, do you want to come with me? He said, absolutely. I want to see for my own eyes. So he said, okay, we'll get in the boat and sit right over there. And he rows out to this obscure part of the lake. And you can't see anybody. It's a massive lake. And he smiles at this doubtful person here, the skeptic. And he says, now what are you going to do now? He said, well, this is what I do. And he took out a stick of dynamite and lit it and threw it in the lake, and go, and all of these fish come floating to the surface, and he starts gathering them in. And that skeptic said, see, I told you, you're violating the law. This is no good. I'm going to turn you in. And without saying another word, he just lit another stick of dynamite, and he threw it in the guy's lap and said, are you going to complain all day, or are you going to help me fish? What would you have done? Well, you see, sometimes we think it's either or. It might just be both and. Well, I want you to know that we can learn from both sides. It's not either or, both and. The ones who recorded or memorialized God's faithfulness to help them through these times where emotions got them all mixed up. But the others who couldn't see what God had done, they could see what God could do. And you need them both. Well, now Pastor John's going to come up and straighten out all my bad theology. just joking. Help me welcome him as he comes up. Would you give him a hand?
Thank you, Pastor Wayne. I love what he was teaching there because it's exactly what we're talking about with our Come Together series. I love that the scripture gives us permission to come all mixed up, right? We don't have to have it figured out. That neither of the emotions expressed from the older generation of sorrow and sadness, and then the younger generation of joy, neither of those emotions were wrong. But neither of the groups allowed that to keep them from coming together to build what God was about to do. They still work together even with mixed emotions. In fact, you can feel that in your first blank there, that we are going to determine to come together even with mixed emotions. That we are, as Pastor Wayne has said many times before, he said, we're not going to let a temporary emotion cause us to make a permanent decision. That we're not going to let emotions, because they're going to be all over the place. When God's doing something, the enemy's also doing something. We're not going to let that keep us from coming together. In fact, I think one of the greatest gifts I have as a pastor is when I run into a brother or sister and I haven't seen them for a while. I'm like, oh man, I miss seeing you at church. And a lot of times it'll be, oh, well, you know, I've been going through some stuff. I got some things going on with my marriage. I've been working with my kids. I'm kind of struggling with an addiction, stuff going on at work, but I've almost got it figured out, and then I'll be at church. And I'm like, I just want to plead with them and go, no, please don't wait until you have it figured out. Church is where we figure it out. You don't wait until you get your mess cleaned up to come to church. We come to church messy. This is where we are. None of us got it figured out. None of us are perfect. We don't come here when we've got all our ducks in a row and everything lined up and all our emotions are right where we want them. No, we come here just as we are, and God shows us what the next steps are to take. And that this is a church filled with imperfect people following a perfect God. And we're not going to let our emotions dictate our decision on whether or not we're going to come together. We see this beautiful passage here as they just moved forward with God, even with mixed emotions. And I just got to brag on you guys a little bit. I mean, we just introduced this Come Together series last week in the Nehemiah wall out there. Talking about last week, finding your 5%, fitting what it is that God's called you to do with your gift and your talent and your ability, with all kinds of opportunities to serve on the wall. And hundreds of you went out there. Many of you are still considering where you might serve and how it might work in your schedule. 82 of you signed up on the first weekend. I'm blown away. You moved past any of those mixed emotions that you might have had. Well, what if I don't find something? In fact, out of the 32 of you, there wasn't even anything on the wall that specifically matched your gift or your ability. And you could have easily let mixed emotions say, well, there's nothing on this wall for me, so I guess I'm moving on. No, but instead you approached the team out there and you said, here's what I would like to offer to God. Can you do anything with it? I'm so proud of you. That took guts, that took determination, that took obedience, moving past whatever mixed emotions or thoughts were going on in your head, saying, no, this is what I'm going to do for the Lord. Thank you. Thank you for stepping forward, stepping out in that. I don't know if you guys noticed in those pictures there, but just like we see in the book of Ezra, we have multiple generations at the wall. You know why? Because we have multiple generations of gifts, talents, and abilities that God is going to use to build what it is He's about to do. Not just one, but many. In fact, we're at this interesting season as a church. Never before in the history of a church have we had 5 generations present in the same room at the same time. That's right, we've got the builders, we've got the boomers, we've got the Xers, we've got the millennials, and then what they're calling Generation Z, all here, all at the same time, all with something to offer. Is there going to be mixed emotions? Of course there is. Look at how different those generations are. Everyone experiencing and seeing things through different lenses, but we are determining we're going to come together anyways, because God needs all of us to be a part of what it is that He's about to do. I love the fact, I was even talking with Tim Savage earlier, and he was saying, I had a woman approach me and say, I don't know, but I can golf, and I can train people how to golf. Can God use that? And Tim's like, absolutely, golfing for God. Come on, that's awesome. We got a brand new interest group starting up right there. But I promise you this, I haven't talked with all of you, but I've talked with a lot of you, and I've been in ministry long enough to know exactly how the enemy works. The moment you take a stand is the enemy pushes back. He wants to convince you, what do you think you're doing? And in fact, I had a brother talk to me after the 5 o'clock service last night. He said, I do karate. I train people in karate. I've been doing it for years. I felt like God was saying, volunteer your services. Tell the church you want to be able to use that to help others. And then the very next day, he has all these thoughts going through his head. Take that back. Who do you think you are? What, are you trying to be something special? Karate at church. Come on, that's ridiculous. What do you think you're doing? Why don't you contact them again and let them know you're not going to do that? Where does that come from? That's the enemy. He's a big old bully on the playground trying to push us around and say, what are you doing here? This isn't your place, and this is exactly our place. And I was so glad he shared that with me because he called it what it was. He said, this was not God. This was the enemy trying to keep me from bringing glory to God in my gift. He does karate for Christ, golf for God. I don't know what it is that God's going to do with you, but if you let Him, it's going to be amazing. It's going to bring Him glory. Don't let the enemy keep you from it simply because you got mixed emotions going on. And this is exactly what the devil does all the time. In fact, you can see him do that here with the people of God. Ezra chapter 4, verses 1 through 6, here comes the bully. Now, when the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the people of the exile were building a temple to the Lord God of Israel, they approached Zerubbabel and the heads of fathers' households and said to them, let us build with you, for we, like you, seek your God. Oh, that's so nice of them. And we have been sacrificing to Him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us up here. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the heads of the fathers' households of Israel said to them, you have nothing in common with us in building a house to our God. But we ourselves will together build to the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. Then the people of the land discouraged, underline that word, discouraged, underline that in your notes. The people of the land discouraged the people of Judah and frightened, underline that word, frightened them from building and hired counselors against them to, underline this word, frustrate their counsel all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Now, in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, they wrote, underline this word, an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah and Jerusalem. Now, look at those 4 words that you just underlined. They were discouraged, they were frightened, they were frustrated, and they were accused. The enemy doesn't have new tricks. He doesn't need to have any new tricks because all of his old tricks work on us every single time. The enemy's been doing the same thing then as he's doing to us now. Any of you trying to step forward in what God's doing and you feel a little frustrated, you feel a little discouraged? Are you hearing accusations in your head saying, who do you think you are? Remember what you've done? Anybody being intimidated by fear? Don't try and step out in that. You're going to lose. You're going to fail. You're going to fall. The enemy's same tricks work then as they do now. And we have to decide that even when we're receiving mixed messages, are we still going to move forward? And that's your second point there. Even with mixed messages, we're still going to come together. They were hearing God say through the prophet Zechariah and Haggai, build God's temple. And then they hear these mixed messages from all around them saying, who do you think you are? Using political means and power means to get them to stop. And you know what? Sadly, it worked. For 12 long years, the temple of God, which God had called his people back to build, the very reason he had called them back, for 12 long years, it sat unbuilt. It sat half finished. And I feel just welling up inside of my spirit right now to declare to some of you that there are some things in your life that have sat unfinished, half built, almost completed, and the enemy has convinced you that it will never be finished, it will never be healed, it will never be done, it will never change. And I want to say to you that the God that has started it is faithful to complete it. He will do that in us if we are willing to let him do that through us. Do not buy into the lie of the enemy that it's done, that you're over, that you failed too many times. It's time to come back. It's time to let him move. It's time to let God do what he wants to do through each of us, and he's only getting started. Don't let the bully keep pushing you around. Yeah, there's going to be mixed messages. The devil is really good at taking God's words and twisting them. He's really good at taking the things that God has told us to do and manipulating us in a way where we think, well, if there's resistance, must have mean I missed it. I don't know where this strange theology has come from, but it's pervasive throughout the body of Christ. I hear people say, well, I must have missed God because I'm experiencing an attack. I'm getting all kind of resistance. Can I just tell you very clearly, resistance doesn't mean you've missed it. In fact, it means you've made it very often because you're right in the middle of what God is doing. If the enemy is pushing back, don't take that as proof that somehow you've missed what God is doing. No, it's because you're doing what God's asking you to do. Anybody that works out in a gym understands that. You can go out in a gym and put the little peg under the first weight and go, woohoo, I'm so strong, look at me. And you're not really building any muscle at all. Because in order to build muscle, you have to drop that peg down a couple more weights, right? In order to have what? Resistance. Because the more resistance that you have, you begin to feel it in your muscles, and it begins to burn, and that's how you begin to build muscle. At least that's what people who work out tell me. So if you're experiencing resistance right now, God's building spiritual muscle. That bully's not going to take you down. God is bigger. If you're experiencing pushback, don't back up. Step up. I see that going on in Roseburg, Oregon, where we grieve with the families, the horrible shooting at the community college. Many of them were targeting Christians. And the church had two choices. Do we back up? Do we get quiet? Or do we bring a message that is clear and loud in the middle of all the mixed messages? Yeah, politicians are jumping on this situation. All these opinions are flying. All these mixed messages. But I see one message rising up. And Pastor Randy Scroggins and New Beginnings Church is kind of leading the charge in actually being a voice of hope in the middle of hopelessness, a light in the darkness. When everyone is panicking, they are bringing peace. And I love that in the middle of these mixed messages, we have the church rising up to bring the true message of hope when the world needs it most. And in fact, I have the privilege of sharing with you that we're actually sending a team here from New Hope Oahu to join with New Hope Eugene, who's joining with Pastor Randy at New Beginnings Church in Roseburg, Oregon. And we're going to be doing a fundraising benefit concert a couple weeks from now. And all the proceeds are going to go towards the families of the ones who lost people, as well as those who are encountering lots of hospital bills because their friends and family are fighting for their lives. All the money is going there. How much better is that than a Christian platitude or like, oh, we're going to pray for you? No, we're putting our money where our mouth is. We're putting our action to our feet. We're walking out our faith and we're saying, God loves you. We're going to show it. That's the message that the world needs to hear. Yes, there's going to be all kinds of mixed messages, but let us be the message of hope in the middle of all these other ridiculous things that everybody else is saying. I want to thank you for being that message right where you wake, right where you work, right where you worship, for not choosing the safety of the seats, but stepping into the battle of the arena. It's not easy. Yes, we fall. It's not because you're perfect, but you are fighting the good fight of faith. And I know many of you have heard this before, but I just want to remind you what Theodore Roosevelt said. And in fact, I'd like to ask you to just close your eyes and listen as I read the words of Theodore Roosevelt, because this is what every Christian is called to. It's not the critic who counts. Not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. And I just thank you right now for entering the arena of faith. You're fighting for your marriage, not a perfect one, but a good one. You're fighting for your family, not a perfect family, but a good one. You're fighting to provide for your family, and you don't even like that job, but you keep showing up anyways because that's your job, is to provide for your family. You're fighting for your faith, where you wake and work and worship in a culture that is increasingly resistant to people of faith. Can I thank you? Not because you're perfect, not because you do it right every time, but because you keep getting back into the arena and you have not given up on the fight. And that means God is going to use you to bring victory every place where the enemy is saying, this is never going to change. I want to speak to you right now. God's just getting started. He's not anywhere close to being done yet, and he's going to use you to bring it through. Mixed emotions, yeah, they're going to be there. Mixed messages all the time. But you and I are going to see victory because we are putting one person first. And his name is Jesus. And that's your final point here, is that we're coming together, no matter what, to get rid of mixed priorities. We're putting God first above every other thing. Man's going to have his plans, but God's will prevail. And I love how God took this dejected, despondent people after 12 years of it sitting there, and he said, I'm going to use you. And the enemy's going to try and bring mixed messages like a table of Krispy Kremes in your gym. Like, he will. He's going to try and distract you. I mean, this actually happened. I don't know what they were thinking. I'm not sure what the logic was. Like, oh, maybe we'll get more signups when people feel guilty after gorging on donuts. But can you imagine there, like, you're sweating off the pounds, right? You're doing your due diligence, and then you look over and the glazed goodness is calling your name. Can you imagine that, just being there like, oh my gosh, well, I deserve at least one, but you can't ever just eat one, right? You got to have like 12. Well, maybe that's just me, but that's exactly like the enemy, right? We're trying to move forward. We're trying to do what God's called us to do, and he puts a box of Krispy Kremes right next to where we're exercising. He's not putting it outside the building. No, he's going to put it right in your path to confuse your priorities. But look what happens when we get our priorities right. Oh man, what God is about to do. Ezra 6:14 through 16. So the elders of the Jews continued to build and prosper under the preaching of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah, descendant of Iddo. They finished building the temple according to the command of the God of Israel and the decrees of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. And the temple was completed on the 3rd day of the month Adar, in the 6th year of the reign of King Darius. And then the people of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the exiles, that's everybody, celebrated the dedication of the house of God with what? With what? Joy. Wait, was it just the young people who were celebrating with joy? It was everyone. So that means the elders had to make a choice to not only celebrate what God had done, to be a part of what God was about to do. You see, it doesn't take any joy from the past to celebrate and enjoy the joy of what God is doing in the present. You see, it takes a multi-generational surrender to have a multi-generational song. It was a multi-generational journey resulting in a multi-generational joy. And God is doing that same thing in this place as He brings together all of these generations to be a part of what it is that He's about to do. And He's calling you by name. It reminds me of when God had stirred in Cindy and I's heart. After 10 years, we planted New Hope Seattle and been pastoring there. A lot of our family lived there, amazing community of friends, and God was calling us back to the islands. And we approached all our 5 boys and we said, hey, you guys, here's what we feel like God's stirring in us, but we want you to know it's not just a mom and dad thing. We want you guys to hear the Lord too. Why don't you guys pray and ask God what He might want to do through you? And each of them, from youngest to oldest, they all prayed. They all shared with us in their own way. They felt that God was going to use them in Hawaii. And that was really important because they were about to leave everything that they knew. For the 3 youngest, they'd never been anywhere else but Seattle. The twins, Justice and Jackson, they'd never even been on an airplane. All they knew was that reality. It was important for them to know as we handed them each a ticket, that they had a ticket with their name on it and an assigned seat, because God had an assigned purpose for their life. They weren't just baggage. They weren't just, we're dragging them along and whatever God's going to do through mom and dad. No, there was a purpose for them, and they needed to understand that, hear that from God, and know that for themselves because of what it is that they were about to face that was brand new, something they'd never seen before. You know, when they got on the plane, Justice and Jackson, they weren't sure, they were a little squirrely, and so I considered, maybe those luggage compartments above our head might not be a bad idea. That could solve some problems there. I didn't actually do that. I thought about it, but I didn't actually do that. You know, why didn't I do that? Because they had assigned seats. There was a seat with their name on it. The price was already paid for that ticket. We showed them how to put their seatbelts on, and then the engines began to come alive. And they heard the pilot saying, okay, we're going to be in a taxi, make our departure to Hawaii, and begin to work down the runway. And as the nose of the plane began to come up, they began to hold even tighter to the armrests. And they're looking at Cindy and I going, is this okay? Like for some assurance that this is normal? As the whole plane begins to creak, right? You know that sound? As all the metal and the bolts and everything's straining under the weight. And then there's that amazing moment with all the massive metal and men rises up out of the air and into the sky and into the ether. And you could look at their faces and they're like that fine line between enjoyment and absolute terror. And the only thing that kept them from going into the fear place is they kept looking at Cindy and I going, this is normal, right? This happens in a flight. And of course, Cindy and I had been on multiple flights. We're like, no, it's good. God is with us. Angels are protecting us. This is normal. It always sounds like that. You know, flying up into the air. And then finally we get to the cruising altitude speed and then take a deep breath. And it was right then that Justice had the courage to be able to look out the window. And it was like all this joy just welled up inside him. And he said, I see things! Like he just yelled it out in the middle of the plane cabin. Because he'd never seen Seattle like that. Not from 10,000 feet. He'd only seen it as a little kid from the ground. And now he was seeing this city that they'd grown up in a whole nother way. And I think that's exactly what's going on here. We need every generation on board. We need the older generation because the younger generation is going to look to you like, is this okay? Is this normal that we're going through? Is it supposed to shake this much? Is it supposed to sound that loud? And you can assure them because you've been with God for a while. You've been around a time or two. You've seen Him take you through the lowest of lows and the highest of highs. You've been through multiple changes and you've seen the faithfulness of God. And all they need to hear from you, older generations, is that yes, God is with us. He's doing this. He's in charge. You don't have to worry. This is okay. And we also need the younger generation. Just like my sons looked out the window and I'd seen Seattle many times from a plane. But it was like I was seeing it again for the first time through my son's eyes. And us older generations, we get used to stuff. We kind of begin to miss stuff that used to bring us joy. And we begin to see things again for the first time. A fresh perspective for what it is that God is doing. Stuff that we've taken for granted. The younger generation is now showing us, look at what I see. I see things. And that joy that we used to have rises up again inside, and we get a fresh perspective for what it is that God is about to do. And all of a sudden you can understand, oh, that's why He's got us in this together. Young and old, 5 generations, all with one destination. It's picked out by God Himself. You got mixed emotions? It's okay. He's handing you a ticket anyways. It's got your name on it and a seat assignment. You going to come on board? Hearing mixed messages, what the Lord is saying, what the enemy is saying, still got your name on it. Your seat assignment. Will you come on board? Mixed priorities, that's why He's handing you the ticket, and He's saying you don't have to live this next season the way that you've lived your last seasons. You can put Christ first and see what's next. He won't force any of us on the plane, but I promise you what He's not going to do. He's not going to offer you a ticket and go, oh, I'm sorry, because of your age, I really don't have a seat for you. He's not going to do that. He's not going to offer you a ticket and go, oh, you know what, because of your past and the things that you've done, I'm afraid there's no room on this flight. No, these tickets have been purchased for the cost of Jesus Christ and His sacrifice on the cross. He's calling each of us by name in every generation. Will you come on board? Will you come together? I'm not the pilot. This is not my plane. I don't choose the destination, but He's chosen all of us to go where He's going. Do you want to go? Well, show the pilot of your soul by standing right now.